John was meticulously working on the latest batch of test data, a monotonous but crucial task for his team's new vehicle project. Even though he found it dull, he diligently organized the information for analysis. Suddenly, his phone chimed with a text alert. Glancing at the screen, he saw it was from an unknown number with a local area code. He initially ignored it, thinking it was spam. After a while, he took a break and checked his phone. The message was from an unregistered number. Initially dismissing it as potential spam, he reconsidered and decided to open it. What he saw stunned him: an explicit photo. Confused, he read the accompanying text. "Pay attention. You still have time at Sam's Grill, 6 p.m. His heart raced. He was about to delete it, thinking it was a mistake, when he noticed something on the woman's leg, a tiny mole, almost invisible but familiar. It was the same mole his wife Emma had on her left leg. Staring at the photo in disbelief, he couldn't deny what he was seeing. He reread the message, trying to understand its meaning. Sam's Grill was a local bar, but Emma never went there. She was supposed to be on her way to Chicago for an important presentation. It was 5:15 p.m., and her flight was scheduled to land at 4:30. Normally, she would call or text once she arrived, but maybe she was busy with her team. He thought about calling her, but decided to address the mysterious message first. "Who is this, and where did you get this photo?" he typed. "Should I meet you at Sam's?" Packing up his things, he resolved to get some answers. He texted Emma. "How was your flight?" "I'm grabbing a bite. Call me when you're free." Trying to keep a low profile while he figured things out, he walked to his car. His phone buzzed again. Expecting a reply from Emma, he saw another message from the unknown sender. "I'll be there, but you'll find someone more interesting than me." His head was spinning. He quickly checked the map on his phone and drove off. It would take him about half an hour to get to Sam's Grill, and he hoped to be there by 6 p.m. On the way, his phone rang. It was Emma, saying she was busy with her team and would call him later. "Love you," she said. He barely registered her words, his mind preoccupied with what he was about to uncover. His heart pounded as he pulled into Sam's parking lot at 6:12 p.m. The sender didn't specify who to look for, so he assumed they would find him. But the hint about someone more interesting unsettled him. Who could have such personal details about Emma? Inside, he was in turmoil. He trusted Emma completely, and their relationship seemed solid. But there was no other way for someone to have her photo like that. He was about to discover the truth in minutes, and it terrified him. The bar was dimly lit, with a spacious dining area and a cozy bar. He chose a seat at the end of the bar and ordered a beer, glancing around nervously. A man in a suit walked past, heading to a table where a group of people were laughing and chatting. And then he saw her, Emma, sitting at the table, smiling as she accepted a drink from a charming man in a suit. She looked stunning in her black dress and pearls. John moved automatically, heading towards her. When she saw him, her smile vanished, replaced by shock. Ignoring her reaction, John reached out and grabbed the man's arm. With his left hand yanking back forcefully, John caused the man to drop his drinks and stumble backward, yelping in pain. John pulled him past and let go, ready to throw a punch. But the man had already fallen onto the floor, scrambling away before John could act. "Stay down, Dan," John warned. Dan, now a mess of spilled drinks and disheveled clothes, nodded silently, too stunned to move. John turned back to the table, where the others sat in shocked silence. He recognized several faces from Emma's team, people who had been to their home many times. It struck him as odd that such loyalty could coexist with betrayal. Someone at the table knew the truth and had chosen to reveal it. Briefly, he considered finding out who, but dismissed the idea as unimportant. "I'm going home," he declared to Emma. "If there's any chance for our marriage, you'll come home too." She nodded, starting to rise, but he gestured for her to wait. "Give me a moment to leave first," he said. Before departing, he addressed Lisa and Ben. "Lisa, Ben thinks you're in Chicago." "Ben, does Julie know where you are?" Their silence and averted eyes spoke volumes. Is everyone in this team hiding something? He wondered. Sadly, he knew the answer was yes, at least for some. The drive home felt surreal, and before he knew it, he was in his driveway. Entering the house, he grabbed a beer from the fridge and sat in the living room. He knew Ben and Julie well, but the other couples at the table were less familiar. Considering contacting Ben or Julie, he realized he didn't want to talk and had little information. However, given Lisa and Ben's deceit, he decided to send a message. Just heard from Emma. The team's plans have changed. Best check in. Now they were aware of a disruption and could choose how to respond. At least he had done his part. 20 minutes later, the garage door opened, signaling Emma's arrival. He waited in the living room as she entered, still in her black dress but without shoes or jewelry. Despite her calm demeanor, he sensed her readiness to speak. She sat on the sofa opposite him, and he let the silence linger. It didn't last long. "It's not what you think," Emma began, but he raised his hand to stop her. "You have no idea what I think," John retorted. "I don't need a long explanation. We're both engineers. We know there's no single answer to anything. Asking why is just rationalizing failures. So I won't ask why. Let's start with something else. How long has this been going on? How many people know? How often? Do our friends and colleagues know about this?" "No, John, it's not like that," Emma protested. "We're a team. Our plans got disrupted. Instead of heading home and then traveling again tomorrow, Dan suggested we stay in town to rest before the big day. I didn't see everyone there." "Where was the rest of the team?" he asked. "Some stayed home for an extra night and will meet us at the airport tomorrow," she admitted. "But you chose to deceive me," he accused. "You seemed very close to Dan. Is there something going on between you two that I should know about?" "First off, Dan is okay. He talked the diner owners out of pressing charges," she stated, as if that made everything better. His eyes widened in disbelief. "I couldn't care less about him. If he hadn't fallen, I would have broken his nose." "And the verdict isn't out yet," John remarked. "Let him press charges. I've been to jail before. It doesn't scare me." "Good point." "This could be solid evidence," he said, smirking. "Do you love him?" Emma fell silent, gathering her thoughts. "Yes," she admitted. The word hung in the air, thick with implication. Silence fell once more, fraught with tension. "He's not my boyfriend. Nothing happened." "Yes, I should have told you about the change in plans, but it didn't seem important whether I was here or in Chicago. You weren't expecting me, and I was still with the team. We just had dinner and went to our rooms. There was no reason for your reaction. He only brought drinks. You humiliated me in front of everyone." Defensive now, she tried to maintain composure. John retrieved his phone, brought up the incriminating message, and slid it across the table to her. Her face fell as she recognized the photo and the circumstances, realizing denial was futile. She began to speak again, but John activated the voice recording app on his phone. John placed his phone back in his shirt pocket. "Our team," Emma hesitated, searching for the right words. "We're very close-knit in many ways. Most of us," she continued. "We have a small group that meets regularly. Dan hosted us all. We were the ones handling most of the proposal preparations. You know how much time I invested in this. I can't pinpoint when it began, but it was sometime after Dan became the lead. We worked closely together, and I was drawn to him." "It just happened," Emma confessed. "Intentional," John interjected. "Intimacy isn't spontaneous. First you undress. There are numerous conscious choices involved. We both understand that, so please spare me." So nearly 6 months he answered his own query. "That's when Dan took over the contract, correct?" She nodded. "The team," he resumed. "All of you?" He refrained from using explicit language. "Are you all involved?" She nodded again. "Yes, Dan believed it would foster trust and team cohesion." "A company romance club?" he said sarcastically. "Now you're being disrespectful. It's much deeper than that. I feel deeply connected to Dan and my team more than ever." Emma's confidence surged, and John sensed trouble brewing. "Unfortunately, you'll see some personnel changes in your team," John stated. "What have you done?" Emma gasped. "John, if you tell anyone else, it'll cause more harm. Let them decide for themselves. We have to accept it. I can't stay silent and be complicit. I favor Ben and Julie. I prefer them over Lisa and Bob," he remarked. I informed them that my travel plans have changed, how your friends respond to their spouses, and how their spouses accept these responses is their choice. I can rest easy with my decision. John, we have the most productive team in our company's history, she almost shouted. You benefited too. Just because we held team meetings on Wednesdays doesn't mean you missed out. I never excluded you. You always had access. So I was with my team earlier and you were unaware. Do you want to discuss that photo you showed me? She taunted. Just because you know now, and just because your ego is bruised, you want to ruin everything my team and I have accomplished, Emma hissed, growing angrier by the moment. It excited John. His heart rate surged as Emma continued to defend her team's actions. He briefly entertained the thought of forgiving her during the drive home from Sam's. If this was just a one-time thing with Dan, that notion had long since vanished. He didn't need to hear more. He didn't want to hear more, but she persisted. No, sir, we won't let you off the hook. You should text Ben and Julie to let them know you heard from me. We're stuck in Atlanta but have flights booked for tomorrow morning. That's the story Lisa and Bob will stick to, and you'll support them. Got it? She yelled. There are millions at stake in this deal, and your complaints mean nothing. Send the message, then we'll discuss our next steps. What next? John yelled back. There is no next. Are you leaving now? You, your messed-up team, and your leader Dan can carry on however you want. We're finished. I'll find a lawyer this week and settle everything. It's a straightforward 5,050 split. You keep your pension and I keep mine, John declared. Go, you have reservations in the city. Use them. Head to Chicago and chalk up another big win for you and your team. John, please send those messages, Emma pleaded, her tone much softer now. If we lose Lisa or Bob before the presentation, the company could lose millions. Both you and I could miss out on tens, maybe hundreds of thousands in commissions and bonuses. Just think of the possibilities with that money. Just us. Forget about this misunderstanding, please. Don't let baseless concerns about casual relationships ruin everything. Dan says, I'm on track for CEO status. I just need to keep doing what we're doing for a few more years. Don't you want that for me, for us? Emma implored. Just leave, John barely managed to utter before a forceful blow struck his back, knocking the wind out of him and leaving him sprawled on the floor with a knee pressed into his back. Don't hurt him, Emma interjected. At least not too much, she added. So the jury's still out on whether my nose was broken, huh? Dan remarked, leaning in beside John as he lay pinned. John suspected there must be a transmitter. Now I know whose side she's on. Let's see whose nose ends up broken. Dan grinned. Grab his phone and send those texts for him. We don't have time for this nonsense, someone instructed. Hoisting him from the floor, John feigned resistance, causing the person behind him to struggle, revealing they were a weak office type, wheezing from the effort. After being used as a punching bag, John caught his breath and prepared to retaliate. Unlike Dan and his team of polished executives, John's team operated in the field with the 160th Sword Detachment from Fort Campbell, Kentucky. Though they weren't on the same level, after working alongside the crews on test missions, they were invited to support the trials under the guidance of seasoned veterans who piloted aircraft modified by John's team specifically for their needs. If certain individuals showed up at your door, it meant your days were numbered. John and his team developed the equipment essential for entering hotspots, and more importantly, getting out safely. They took great pride in ensuring mission success and the safe return of all personnel. The members of the 160th and their formidable passengers deeply appreciated the hard work John's team put into making their gear reliable. Among them, Staff Sergeant Troy Baker was the most intimidating figure. From vagrants to colonels, everyone respected him. Known for his unwavering commitment to never leaving anyone behind, his reputation was solidified during the Columbia mission. Staff Sergeant Baker had instructed a young lieutenant on his maiden mission to stay close. The lieutenant seemed to be handling things well until FARC rebels ambushed their team. Despite fending off the attack, Baker noticed the lieutenant on the ground, bleeding from a head wound. He's unconscious, the medic noted, assessing the lieutenant's vital signs. Baker knelt down, lifting the lieutenant onto his shoulders. He's gone, the medic reiterated. Maybe, Baker replied, but he's still coming home with us. The medic looked at him as if he was crazy. We've got over 5 miles through thick forest to the landing site. We'll be lucky to make it back in one piece, let alone hauling a dead guy, he thought. But Baker intercepted his thoughts. "I'd do the same for you, Billy," he assured the medic. "Stay close in case I need you." Their exploits became legendary upon their return to base. As the helicopter touched down, the doctor awaited them. The medic informed the doctor of the lieutenant's condition. Nodding, the doctor extracted a flashlight and checked the lieutenant's pupils. They contracted under the beam of light. "Care to reconsider your diagnosis, doctor?" the doc queried. The medic hustled the revived lieutenant to the operating room. Staff Sergeant Baker was a timeless figure, rarely speaking, but when he did, everyone listened. In an age of mass production and disposability, he stood apart, handcrafted and unique. John and his team were fascinated by him. During downtime between missions, Baker showed his gratitude by teaching them basic yet effective hand-to-hand combat techniques. "I know the biggest challenge you'll face is a jammed copier or a painful paper cut," Baker advised. "But if you stay in this field, you might end up in interesting places. If you ever encounter the locals, you'll have some useful skills." "Let's hope a paper cut is the worst obstacle you face," John said, regulating his breathing. Leaning subtly against his captor, he recalled the combat techniques demonstrated by the senior sergeant. "Sometimes you can't do much but endure the blows. It's not ideal, but it happens. Remember, even when you're struck, you can still fight back, just outsmart your opponent." John applied this lesson of passive resistance, sapping his captor's strength. "Give me the phone," Pete demanded, locking eyes with him. "Now that you know about my affair with your wife, you're just another feeble geek. Do as we say, and maybe you can still be with Emma when the team doesn't need her. Don't forget, her bonus can afford you luxuries. Maybe she'll even buy you a synthetic companion for those lonely moments." John remained silent as Pete relished in humiliating him. "Where is it?" Pete asked, noticing the outline of a phone in John's shirt pocket. "Ah, found it." Pete reached for it with his right hand. John forcefully withdrew his right heel, striking his captor's shin and pulling it down until it collided with his captor's toes. Flexing his arms, he broke free, eliciting a cry of pain as his captor tumbled under his weight. Pete's eyes widened in recognition as John swiftly extended his right hand, executed a shoulder turn as the first sergeant had taught him, and delivered a powerful punch to the center of Pete's face. A geyser of blood spurted from Pete's nose as he crumpled to the ground as if struck by an axe. Turning to identify his assailant, John discovered it was Bob lying on the floor, clutching his leg and whimpering, "I think you broke my leg." John forcefully stomped on Bob's foot, eliciting another cry of pain. "That should erase any doubt," John retorted, pivoting to face Pete, who was attempting to rise to his knees, hands raised to his injured face. Leaning close, John whispered in Pete's ear, "Looks like you've got a broken nose." "Pete, I'm not willing to sacrifice myself for the team just yet," John declared, then delivered a sharp blow to Pete's temple, making him slump to the ground. Adrenaline coursing through John's veins, he quickly scanned the room for Emma. Suddenly, a sharp pain struck the middle of his back and neck, making him drop to one knee. Turning to face his attacker, he saw Emma wielding a cast-iron skillet. Her swing missed, only grazing John's side. Rising to his feet, John snatched the skillet from her. "John, we can still fix this," Emma pleaded desperately. "Think of the money you'll lose. I'll end the affair, I swear. Just you and me, like before." Rubbing the back of his head, John was astounded by her rapid transformations. It was like she was a character in a horror movie, changing to fit each scenario. He chuckled darkly, and Emma misread his smile as acceptance. She moved to hug him, but he steadied her with his left hand. After a brief pause, he delivered a punch to her nose with his right hand, hard enough to break it but not knock her out. Emma screamed and fell to the floor. "Doesn't it hurt?" John asked coldly. "Your eyes are watering, you can't see or breathe well, and there's blood everywhere. It's quite effective." "Why did you hit me?" Emma sobbed. "Because I could," he answered bluntly. His phone continued to record everything. He believed he had enough evidence to justify his actions. Recalling the staff sergeant's advice, he surveyed the room, decide when to act, and do so decisively. Except for Bill whimpering in the corner and Emma trying to stop her nosebleed, John was the only one moving. "You've saved another ace," he thought. "Doesn't fit your profile, lover boy. And Bill will be back to work by Monday. Such bad luck missing out on those millions in bonuses," John mused aloud. "I wonder what Art will think of all this," he pondered. Considering calling emergency services, he hesitated, realizing the police would prevent further interrogation of Emma. He knelt beside her, showing how to pinch the bridge of her nose to stop the bleeding. The adrenaline rush subsided, leaving him drained, and he slumped into a chair. "Where did my wife go?" John asked. The Emma he knew seemed completely different from the woman before him. "Was it worth it?" he inquired. Emma shook her head. "It could have been," she replied. "If only you'd agree. We were so close. After Monday, I'd be in the executive suite. This setback will delay everything." "I can fix it, but it's a setback. Becoming vice president was your ultimate dream?" John questioned. "What about us? The lies, the deception, will it continue?" "John, you're so naive." Pete saw this. "He warned me that your strict morals and Boy Scout mentality would hold me back. He urged me to break free from your influence and forge my own path." "Did he say that before or after he took advantage of you?" John retorted. "You don't know half of it," she spat. "I tried following your advice thinking it would help my career. Want to know what really works?" John stayed silent. "Sometimes you just have to step aside when someone's self-destructing." She kept recording. "Let me tell you, my dear husband, your advice didn't help much. I completed my assignments on time and under budget, only to get a few good job comments. Lisa told me what it really takes to succeed. Leveraging relationships to climb the ladder is easier and more enjoyable," she said. "So this started before Dan came into the picture?" John asked. "For a clever engineer, you can be dense, John," she quipped. "It started at a Christmas party a year after I joined. That's when I first got involved with Art, and never looked back." "Wait, you're also involved with Art Vance?" John exclaimed. "Yes, John. Art, Dan, Bill, and anyone else who can help my career. Even now, if you think you've got everything covered. We told Art where we were going. He's rallying the team. They'll get a fabricated story about our absence and proceed without us," Emma concluded. "Still hurting, huh?" John asked as he paused beside Bill, who was still groaning on the floor. "Yeah, you idiot, it's killing me," Bill groaned. "Maybe this will distract you," John remarked, delivering a swift kick to Bill's groin. Bill doubled over, gasping in pain. John got into his car, unsure where to go, but knowing he needed food and a place to stay. He grabbed a burger at a nearby diner and checked into a motel on the outskirts of the city. Despite the residual soreness from his numerous injuries, he fell asleep as soon as his head hit the pillow. He rose early the next morning, his body aching as he reluctantly got out of bed. While brewing coffee in his motel room, his phone chimed. It was a message from the familiar number. Without delay, he opened it. "Apologies for yesterday. Let's meet at the mall around noon. I'll be waiting for you at the bar." He composed a quick reply and poured the lukewarm coffee into a paper cup. "Yes, he'll be there," he mused, setting up his laptop. Back in college, long before he met Emma, John had an economics professor who advised having at least one offshore account as a safety net. With nothing to lose in the professor's guidance, he had opened a bank account in the Cayman Islands, dubbing it his rainy day fund. Over the years, he had diligently contributed to it, amassing around $50,000 in savings. Now, his rainy day fund was about to receive a significant boost. John logged into each bank's secure website with practiced ease, transferring funds from CR Inc.'s payment account into his personal account. He retained $100,000 in the original account. After showering and changing into fresh clothes, he readied himself to meet the mysterious sender. Arriving at the mall just after noon, he spotted a suave, well-groomed man around his age who gestured in his direction. John approached him. "I believe you messaged me," John said, taking a seat. "I regret how things unfolded." "Finding the right way to tell you wasn't easy," the stranger began. "Why don't you introduce yourself and explain your connection to Emma?" John countered. "I used to be on her team. After 8 years in the Army, I left due to injuries sustained in battle. I was hired about 6 months ago and joined Pete's team 3 months back. When I mentioned working for Emma to a friend, he asked for her full name and we discovered a mutual acquaintance. He asked me to keep an eye on Emma as a favor. Initially, everything was fine. The team welcomed me, though the reasons weren't immediately clear, he explained. About 2 months later, Emma approached me. She's attractive and persuasive, but when I inquired about her ring, she simply smiled and said it was okay with you. I didn't agree and made that clear. That's when things turned cold. I started getting the worst assignments and nothing but grief from Pete. I informed our mutual friend of Emma's advances, and he suspected there was more to the story and felt you should know. Pete sent me a photo of them together, attempting to entice me onto the team with a reward if I accepted. Let's just say I don't approve of their tactics. I quit yesterday and reached out to you. Our friend mentioned Troy Baker. If it weren't for Troy, the stranger paused briefly. Let's just say he bailed me out of a tight spot when I was a rookie lieutenant. I owe him a few favors. We both do, John concurred. What's your plan? The stranger inquired. Art pretty much laid it out for me. I could involve the authorities, and yes, Bill, Pete, and even Emma would face legal repercussions, but with his legal team it would likely end in nothing. We reached an agreement. You might view this as a compromise, and perhaps to some degree you're correct. But they took the only thing I couldn't replace. If I can't hold them legally accountable, I'll find another way to make them pay. It won't bring Emma back, but I may realize she's less indispensable than I believed. I've got a trip planned. Please pass on my gratitude to Troy for everything. I won't be returning to work, he stated. And you? John inquired. Well, Troy always praised Baxter Inc. Now that you're gone, they might need another engineer. You'll find they have a different approach at Baxter. The work is challenging, but the perks don't compare to what Tony's team offered, the stranger explained. John grinned. I think I can accept that. The stranger rose and John followed suit. They exchanged a simple nod and departed without further words. Come Monday, John was at the airport checking in for a flight to Costa Rica. Tamarindo seemed like a good place to unwind. Making his way towards security, he spotted a mailbox. Retrieving an envelope from his pocket addressed to the U.S. Department of Justice, Washington, D.C., he dropped it in. Inside was a flash drive containing a recording. Maybe they'll be interested. Who knows, he mused. Perhaps Art's lawyers aren't as formidable as he believes, he thought as he proceeded to the security line. 9 months later, John found himself seated at his usual spot in a cafe. Anna, as charming as ever, brought him his beer. Thanks, dear, he said, lifting the bottle to his lips. A piece of mail caught his attention. He held the envelope in his hands, devoid of a return address. He pondered who might have tracked him down. While he hadn't taken elaborate measures to conceal himself, locating him in a small town on the Pacific coast of northern Costa Rica would require resources beyond the norm. His initial suspicion was that Art's associates had located him. He left the envelope untouched for 2 days, cautious but certain it wasn't a bomb. Carlos, John called out to the cafe owner, do you have a knife? Sure, Mr. John, Carlos replied. John handed him the envelope and stepped back cautiously. You can never be too careful, he reminded himself as Carlos opened it. Carlos passed the contents to John, who thanked him and took another sip of his beer. He turned over the envelope, and several sheets of paper slid onto the table, including a note that simply read, Thought you might be interested, with a telephone number instead of a signature. The same number Troy would have the means to locate him, John surmised. I can live with that, he thought. He flipped through another sheet, revealing a newspaper article with a photograph. The image depicted Pete, Bill, Emma, and Betty being escorted out of the CR building in handcuffs. The headline proclaimed, 4 accused of multi-million-dollar procurement fraud. John couldn't help but smile. Maybe Art's legal team isn't as formidable as he presumed, he mused. A habit he picked up due to his limited Spanish and a fondness for hearing English spoken, even if it was only by himself. Anna, another beer, please, he requested, extending his empty bottle. Sure thing, Mr. John, Anna replied. Thank you, Anna, he acknowledged, taking a sip and gazing out at the vast expanse of the deep blue Pacific Ocean.